the idea that, you had players doing media post game before Darvin Ham, which is not the norm. You had LeBron James getting his clothes on and leaving, not talking to reporters, clearly a sign of frustration. You tell us, just how bad is it right now on your beat?
It's bad. It's bad. They've lost 9 of 12. And I think entering last night's game, there was a sense of this is a must-win stretch. Anthony Davis said as much after the game last night of like all these, they're home for 11 of their next 13 games. One of those road games is a Clippers home game. So technically 12 of the next 13 in LA, and basically in LA for all of January. And for them, they're looking at this as a stretch of they have to make up ground in the standings, because when they won the in-season tournament, they were 4th in the West. And right now they're 10th, just 0.001 percentage points ahead of the Golden State Warriors, who are right there at 11th. So for the Lakers, like this has been a spiral now going on almost a month. And they've had several different starting lineups during that stretch. They have had some injuries to key rotation guys being in and out of the lineup. I think there was also an in-season tournament tax. We saw similar struggles with Indiana with their first few games after the in-season tournament, but they snapped out of that, and they've now been playing much better. They've obviously beaten the Milwaukee Bucks a couple times since then. So I think for the Lakers, there was a level of desperation entering last night that was very palpable. And then they play this Miami team that is without Jimmy Butler, their best player, without Caleb Martin, without Hayward Highsmith, 3 rotation guys and their best player. And they just get their butts kicked throughout the entire game. And really Miami was in control from the jump. Lakers make a late second half run, get the game close, and then Miami's role players just take over. And there's a whole other subplot with like, Jaime Jaquez being the pick after the Lakers, where they selected Jalen Hood-Schifino, and he's out there struggling. I think he was 0 for 4 last night. And then you have Jaquez, who's one of the all rookie first team candidates, and he's making big shots. He's guarding LeBron. And like there was also kind of that weird subplot. But overall, the Lakers lose to an undermanned Miami team. And then after the game, as you alluded to, typically Darvin Ham speaks about 10 minutes after the buzzer. And last night it's 10 minutes, it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes. We're like, what's going on? All of a sudden we hear locker room open. And typically Darvin Ham speaking, like the head coach speaking post game, is what triggers the locker room opening. But last night it was, okay, locker room's open. So we go in, we start talking to AD. As AD's talking, LeBron and AD have lockers right next to each other. LeBron gets dressed and just torpedoes out. Like he's out of there. He just zooms out. And that's very uncharacteristic. LeBron, like no matter what, he's always been great with the media. He always talks. Occasionally he'll get a night off just because he talks so much that, we kind of are fine with that of, hey, LeBron wants the night off tonight. But last night it was not even really a heads up to us that LeBron wasn't talking. It was just he dipped. We had to confirm, hey, is LeBron, is he going to the podium? Like, what's going on? No, he's not talking tonight. So LeBron's clearly frustrated. And I think he didn't want to say anything he was going to regret publicly. So he left. AD is dejected, soft-spoken. He's down. He's saying no excuses. Like, even with the injuries, even with the lineup changes, even with the schedule, like we can't make excuses right now. We should be above 500 because the loss dropped them below 500 for the first time in almost 2 months. Then Darvin Ham goes, and Darvin Ham is kind of maintaining this optimistic perspective of, we just got to keep chipping away at the rock, and we just got to get healthy, and we haven't been healthy. And then he's talking about changing the lineup again and maybe going back to the original starting lineup from last season, which was really good during the regular season. And then Austin Reeves goes, and he echoes a similar sentiment to Anthony Davis of like, we can't keep making excuses. We can't use the lineup as an excuse. We can't use injuries as an excuse. We have to figure this out. So clearly there was a disconnect. Take away the internal stuff and the stuff that we reported, like publicly, you have 2 of your 3 best players saying we can't make excuses. We can't keep saying we don't have our full rotation. We can't keep saying we've had a tough schedule. We can't keep saying injuries, this and that. And then you have your head coach kind of echoing the complete opposite sentiment, and him continually echoing that sentiment really throughout the season of after every loss, it's, hey, well, this guy was out, or, well, we tried a new lineup and we got to figure out our continuity with it. And like, there's just been a lot of excuse making. And I think at some point internally, people have been fed up with that. And there has been an internal disconnect. I think some of the players are starting to tune things out. I think it's been clear on the court with how they've struggled. I think it's been clear with the body language with players. So right now, things are pretty dire. And, people are wondering, is Darvin Ham on the hot seat? Like, I don't think he's on the hot seat, but I think it's starting to warm. And if they lose to Memphis on Friday, or they lose to the Clippers on Sunday, like, that seat's going to continue to warm. So right now, things are not in a good place with the Lakers. And it's just crazy how 3 weeks ago they were hoisting a trophy in Las Vegas. And now all of a sudden it's like, is the season lost? Like, it's kind of looking that way currently.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to trade deadline, right? Because it'll be a hot topic on this podcast for the next month, and they're going to be one of the main teams, and maybe we can get into it now. But I did kind of want to ask you about Austin Reeves because, right, you said third, pretty definitively like two of the three best players on the team. Austin Reeves entering the season, or we can even go off season, was considered their third best player, paid like it. You had people believing like, hey, why didn't the Spurs max him out? That type of stuff. But obviously he's coming off the bench. He's had his struggles. And it seems like some of the issues that you guys reported on may reside in the handling of him. Tell me about his season. Like where are we at with him?
Yeah, well, Austin started the season off poorly. The Lakers load managed him during training camp in the preseason, coming off the FIBA run and the conference finals run. He's someone who's dealt with some hamstring issues, some lower body issues. And I think he was just worn out during that first month or so of training camp in the preseason. And then entering the season, I mean, he didn't play that well, at least compared to the sky high expectations that, I mean, that run was pretty insane of like, he becomes a starter. All of a sudden he's their third leading scorer. He's making big shots in the playoffs. He has the I'm him moment. He's one of the only guys that played well in the Denver series in that sweep. And then he goes to Team USA, and it's like most people thought that he was going to be a bench warmer on Team USA. And all of a sudden he earns a spot in the rotation. He's closing games. He's basically their sixth or seventh man, depending on the night. And that momentum didn't really carry into the regular season. And then after the ninth game, he gets benched for Cam Reddish. Lakers go with a more defensive, long, athletic approach. And since that point, he's basically been coming off the bench until really last night, and had another game where he started. But I think, if you look at his numbers the last month or so, they've been as good or better than last season during that stretch when he broke out. He's consistently a 50, 40, 90 guy, kind of in that realm. So I think he's back to where we thought he was going to be. I think he's playing at a really high level. I think his defense has regressed from last season, but it's gotten better since the beginning of the year. And I think right now he's playing like a legit third option. It's really been the rest of the guys in the rotation, excuse me, that have struggled. So I think Austin, not the best start to the season, but I think he's bounced back and has looked like the guy that the Lakers wanted and believed he was when they signed him to that 4-year, $48 million deal. Or
yeah,
$54 million deal.
Just to add more context that you are well aware of to that element. You got Austin, you got Rui Hachimura, you got D'Angelo Russell, and the backdrop here in terms of the way this Lakers season has gone is that they forget about the in-season tournament. You go back to the summertime. I remember seeing Rob Pelinka at Summer League in Vegas, and we don't typically, at least I'll speak for myself, I don't typically do something like this where you're, patting people on the back or criticizing them in person for the work they did. And I couldn't help myself when I saw Rob. It was like, damn, Rob, like, nice summer. Like, you guys really were strong. And considering we have written so many things in the past that admittedly have been pretty critical of the Lakers, we had a little chuckle over the fact that he was like, well, coming from you and your place, like, I appreciate it. And so it was like this widely praised summer of roster work, but the focus was Austin, Rui, and D'Angelo and what they had done in the playoffs. Not perfect, a little bit up and down for D'Angelo, obviously. But that was going to be the group going forward to put around LeBron and AD, and to see that plan really fall apart. And with Darvin playing a big part as far as, all right, we're not playing like I want to. Now we're going to switch up the starting lineup multiple times. We're going to change rotations. And to see it all kind of lead to this, it's just messy. I don't know where it leads. You alluded to this earlier, and I've connected with some folks today as well. And like you already kind of said, we'll confirm that in terms of Darvin being on the hot seat right now, I think it's getting warm by the day. I did have it get pushed back to me, the idea that he's on the verge of being fired. So I think he's got a little bit of time, but man, that schedule that you outlined is crucial. And I don't even think I shared this with you off air yet. I'm going to come join you on Sunday. I was going to come to LA anyway next week, but admittedly pushed it up a little bit. So you got Lakers, Clippers Sunday. You get, and that's obviously, you mentioned Friday, the Memphis game, Tuesday, Toronto. And then just all these home games with no back-to-backs during that entire stretch.
So let's talk deadline quick though, because you mentioned Pelinka, and like obviously they're going to be linked rumor wise. Like that's a month away. Well, I mean, I'd ask both you, just like how urgent is it? Urgent enough where we're starting to really expect like they may make another big splash?
I think so. I think as currently constructed, I mean, they're the 10 seed in the West, 35 games into the season. And yes, they've had some injuries to rotation guys, but they've had LeBron, AD, Austin Reeves, and D'Angelo Russell, who I'll now add in another player ranking. I think those are their top 4 guys. They've been healthy for all but 8 games. That's 2 missed games per player. And really, LeBron and AD are the 2 guys who matter the most. They've missed a combined 5 games. So, if you had asked me before the season or told me like, hey, LeBron and AD are going to miss 5 combined games through the first 35 games of the season, what's the Lakers record? I would have guessed at least 20-15 at a minimum, even with factoring in the schedule and whatnot. So for them to be under 500, I think it's a disappointment. They're clearly underachieving. And I think they're going to make another sizable, at least mid-size move, if not a big move. It kind of depends your definition of, as a big move, an all-star level player. Like, I think they might be more on like the fringes of that. But Zach LaVine and DeJounte Murray are the 2 names I continue to hear. Those are both clutch clients. So there's obviously a connection there. But I think both guys plug different holes. Like offensively, I mean, the Lakers have talked a lot about their defense and trying to figure that side of the floor out, but like they've been a bottom 10 offense all season, and they've been a bottom 3 3-point shooting team all season. So like at some point you're not winning a championship as a bottom 10 offense and a bottom 3 3-point shooting team in 2024. So the Lakers need to address that end of the floor. I think Zach LaVine coming in, there are a lot of question marks, the health, the shot selection, the defense, the contract. Like there are a lot of reasons to talk yourself out of it, but the Lakers are in a win now situation. And like LeBron's in year 21, he's 39. I think something drastic has to happen with the way that this team has been playing now for almost a month. So, be it Darvin Ham's future or a big trade, I think something needs to change. Not just, a minor tweak of this lineup, this rotation, whatnot. Like something drastic needs to happen to turn the season around, because right now, as Sam said, like they're spiraling out of control, and
so they are. But
they're almost as bad as the Warriors. They're almost as bad as the Warriors.
they're getting there.
Hey man, they were 2-10 with whatever Darvin always said last year, the 0.00007% chance of making the playoffs, and they shocked the world. Where's the faith in Darvin? He's the king of the comeback. What's going on?
The difference
here,
is I think guys are starting to tune him out, and I think you're seeing that.
Yeah. All right. We got to bring in, we got to build off that bold statement that Jovan just dropped, but Fred Katz just loves nothing more than Laker talk. So I'm so happy that he was able to join the pod with this incredible haircut. I'm sure that's why you were late. You were in the barber chair, Fred. You're looking sharp, brother, man. What a good looking man you are.
I heard Jovan was coming, and I was like, I have to match. I mean, we all know that Jovan has the hair of a 2018 Portland Trailblazers big man. He's like Zach Collins and Myers Leonard had a baby. So wow. I had to step up my game somewhat.
Slater, are you okay with this shade? I mean, you normally dominate the hair rankings on this pod, and
I don't think it's shade.
Ask
think
Fred
it's
about the
shade.
OG Anunoby trade and give me about 3 minutes, and I'll come back with some good looking hair.
All right, Fred, before we move on to your team and the Raptors and all things, the rest of the NBA, I know you just caught the tail end of the conversation, but Jovan has chronicled, all of the chaos in Lakerland. We do think Darvin has a little more time to kind of save his seat here, but starting lineup changes, pressure coming from within. I did, before I throw it to Fred, Jovan, my favorite part of your piece with Shams, and we all know this is not the norm, is we don't often see, according to 6 sources with knowledge of the situation. I mean, there's a lot of leaking happening in this world, and that's when people are frustrated. Fred, what do you think here?
Here's what I want to know, Jovan. The offense has been a problem all season. You just touched on it. Let's say a move either doesn't come or at least doesn't come for a month till they have the trade deadline. What can they do with this roster in the meantime to at least improve their ability to score? They don't get offensive rebounds, not just the shooting. Like, they don't get offensive boards either. What can they do to up themselves from a bottom 10 defense? Because you look at this roster and it was like, I get Gabe Vincent hasn't been there basically all year, but it wasn't supposed to be this level of offensive struggles. They've always had somewhat of a problem in like the half court offense. Even the year they won the title, there was somewhat of a problem with the half court offense, but it wasn't supposed to be this level. What schematically, what strategically, what statistically can this team do? Even if we're just talking about vague sorts of concepts, what can they do to bring this up from being literally a bottom 10 offense like they've been all year?
I think there's a couple things. I think first is potentially going back to that starting lineup that they used last season of Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Jared Vanderbilt, Austin Reeves, and D'Angelo Russell. That group it was dominant in the regular season. It struggled in the playoffs. It was basically net neutral in the playoffs, but had a plus 20 net rating in the regular season. And LeBron missed a big chunk of time, so it wasn't the biggest sample size, but for the most part, it kind of made sense where you have this big athletic front court of LeBron, AD, and Vanderbilt, and then you have the 2 skill guards who can space the floor, be secondary ball handlers and playmakers in D'Lo and Austin. And they've completely gone away from that. And that's kind of been another frustration point, has been, as Sam was discussing, they had continuity was the buzzword of the Lakers offseason, and they've completely thrown that out the window. And really until last night, we're bringing D'Lo, Rui, and Austin all off the bench. And those are your 3rd, 4th, and 5th highest paid players. And I can't think of another team in the league that is benching their 3rd, 4th, and 5th highest paid players, unless it's like an albatross contract. But I wouldn't characterize any of those 3 guys as albatross contracts. So one would be going back to the familiarity of a lineup that has at least worked in the regular season. Now, whether that can work in the playoffs, I think we saw, especially against Denver, that lineup really struggled. They ended up going away from it. And second thing would be going out, kind of in conjunction with that, going back to the 4-out, 1-in system that they used last season. And they've done it a little bit more, but Darvin Ham revamped the offense, went to a 5-out system, and they just don't have 5-out personnel. They don't have the shooting, and they don't have the downhill athleticism that you need to make a 5-out offense work, like with a Golden State or with a Sacramento. Like, the Lakers just don't have that level of skill on the perimeter overall. So I think a couple of things, in my opinion, would be, potentially going back to that starting lineup, although it's just another change that they would be making to the starting group. And then going back to some of the offensive principles that actually worked for them last season. Because last season, they weren't a great offensive team, but with that group, they were about league average offensively and league average from beyond the arc. And that's at least the level you need to get to make a playoff run. But if you're going to be bottom 10 and bottom 3 in those categories respectively, you don't have a chance. You're first round and out if you even make the playoffs. So I think those are a couple tweaks that they could make. But again, they've been making so many changes that at some point they just have to commit to something and stop kind of just throwing stuff against the wall, hoping something's going to work.
All right, gentlemen, great stuff on the Lakers. Jovan, as always, you are more than welcome to hang and chat non-Lakers. Again, I'm repeating myself. That Friday night game is going to be fascinating. I'm curious to see Darvin's mood pregame because, if I'm just being real, he's such an incredibly likable guy that I'm curious to see how, the first time as a head coach, how does he respond to it's never anything personal, but you have all this pressure surrounding you and all these media members who typically, I mean, would you agree like 90+% of the time with Darvin, it's a pretty light mood where he finds a way to cut through whatever tension might exist with, you know, a big smile and a big personality. And now the spotlight is on you. I think it'll be an interesting press conference in that regard.
Yeah. I think Darvin's been a guy who wins the press conference. That was part of why the Lakers are drawn to him. He's got the gravitas, he's got the charm. He's a big dude, and he kind of has that big personality. But recently, I think it's kind of fallen on deaf ears with some of the comments, and again, some of the excuses that were made last night. And I think that the craziest one was comparing the Heat missing Jimmy Butler to the Lakers missing multiple rotation guys.
Yeah,
and actually saying that it was worse for the Lakers that they had multiple rotation guys out, which just to me was you know, I kind of did a double take when I heard that. So I think, you know, at some point he's got to, I think, change that, you know, sort of, I don't want to say PR spin necessarily, but he is someone who he likes to keep the criticism internal. He doesn't like, I mean, he said it publicly. He doesn't like to throw guys under the bus. He doesn't like to criticize players publicly. But at some point, I think he needs to address some of the things that are going wrong where he falls into some of that stuff and have maybe a little bit more of a real conversation when discussing some of this stuff. Because I think when you're saying one thing and your players are saying something completely opposite.
Yeah, the messaging has
to not a good look.
More on board. Yep, agreed.